Shopify has pulled Donald Trump's Shopify stores off of its platform. Donald Trump's apparel or merchandise stores are offline. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. Now, before we get into this story, I kind of want to use this story to highlight an issue that I've actually been talking about for a couple years. And it's the idea of being reliant on a third-party platform for your e-commerce website. Now, it's one thing if you sell on a platform like eBay or Amazon, right? There's benefits that come with being on a platform. You have this huge pool of shoppers. You have this traffic that's coming towards you. You're putting yourself in a place that a lot of people go. Now, traditionally, when you opened up your own e-commerce platform or your own website, a couple years back, the big thing was I want to own and control my own website, right? I don't want to be reliant on or dependent on a third party. That's the whole point of having my own website and getting off of a platform. Now, in the past couple years, Shopify, BigCommerce, Volusion, SquareUp, Squarespace, a lot of these platforms have gotten really big, and the direction that e-commerce has gone is rather than owning your platform, you rent a platform. And the benefit of doing this is for bigger companies, they're not wasting as much time and energy and resources on coding and programming and making their own custom websites. And for smaller e-commerce shops, kind of the same benefits. You're not having to hire developers and all of this, but also somebody who's not great with web design doesn't have to code their own web design. You can go to a platform like Shopify, and for $29 a month, you can have a really clean looking, really professional, really well-functioning website. And you're also not having to worry about the security, right? Shopify is SSL encrypted. They kind of handle the security. So you're not having to worry about any of that. Now, a couple years ago, I think it was about, I guess we've been in quarantine for the past year, but the year prior in the fall, I went to an event called LPX Chicago put on by Google, and there was a speaker from BigCommerce who kind of talked about how the e-commerce industry has moved from an owned model, again, of having and controlling your own website, to a leased model, where you're leasing or you're renting your website. Now, the danger with this is you're reliant on third-party companies. Now, up until recently, Shopify and most other companies have kind of stayed out of the way, right? Like, it's not really our job to determine, Shopify is nothing more than a website builder. It's not really our job to determine who can have a store and who can't sell a store. If you're selling illegal drugs or doing something illegal on Shopify, they may take your account down. But short of that, everybody's allowed to have a Shopify store. And the only issue you might run into is Shopify payments, which is run through Stripe, may not allow you to sell certain products. You might not be able to sell supplements. You might not be able to sell weed paraphernalia or vapes through Shopify payments, but Shopify payments isn't going to make any moral judgments on what you sell and decide to take down your store. Well, this kind of pulls the rug out from under all of this, and I realize some of you are probably going to say, well, I have a Shopify store, but I'm never going to encourage people to storm the Capitol, so I don't have anything to worry about. This is where it kind of becomes a slippery slope. So, and this is actually, Shopify has kind of reversed their stance from before. In the past, we're living in a society of cancel culture. Everybody wants to cancel everybody who they disagree with. And in the past, Shopify has kind of taken a stance that, look, it's not really our place to decide who and who can and who can't have a store. We're going to kind of stay out of it. Whoever wants to have a Shopify store can have a Shopify store. And it almost in some ways went too far. A couple years ago, I had a shop selling collectibles, and I was selling like old stock certificates and things like that. And I had reached out to, my normal supplier was having trouble getting me inventory, and I just happened to one day stumble upon a Shopify store that was selling something I needed. So I placed a big order with them. I think it was about $5,000. The guy never shipped anything, was ignoring me. Finally, I started getting pretty aggressive with the guy, and ultimately the guy wound up sending me a package. What he sent me actually wound up being counterfeit items, and it really bad counterfeits. And I ultimately did a chargeback with my credit card company. I got my money back, but I called Shopify support and I said, look, this store is an outright scam. After I got scammed, I found 3 or 4 videos on YouTube of other people who'd also been scammed on this store. I also found a number of blog posts, forum posts, Reddit posts, Facebook posts of other people who'd been scammed by this store. And it was a big headache, right? Like, the guy wasted my time. I had to do a chargeback. So I was pretty upset. So I called Shopify and I said, look, this guy is running a scam. I was scammed and I'm not the only one. Like, this guy has scammed a lot of people. Like, you guys need to take his store offline. And they said, file a chargeback with your credit card company. I said, oh, well, I did that. I got my money back, but, I want to save other people from having to go through the same headache. Can you look into this or do something about it? And they didn't do anything. They said, they said if he gets enough complaints with chargebacks, eventually his store will wind up getting taken offline. I think really they ultimately meant he'd lose processing. And then it's not their problem, it's the next processor's problem. But if Shopify isn't willing to take down a scam, Shopify was playing pretty loose and willing to let pretty much anybody run stores. Now, for the sake of this discussion in this video, let's completely take the fact that this involves Donald Trump out of the equation. I think Donald Trump is not only one of the most divisive people in the world right now, but I think just the topic of Donald Trump is one of the most divisive topics. So let's forget that it's Donald Trump. Forget your feelings about Donald Trump, whether you like him or hate him. Let's get into this story. This one comes to us from TechCrunch, and it's titled, Shopify Pulls Donald Trump Stores Off of Its Platform. Facebook isn't the only big company taking action against Donald Trump's web presence. In the wake of yesterday's riots in D.C., Shopify, which hosted shops related to Trump's campaign paraphernalia and the outgoing president's personal brand Trump Store, has apparently taken down both of those properties. Shopify doesn't tolerate actions that incite violence based on recent events. We have determined that the actions by President Donald J. Trump violate our acceptable use policy, which prohibits promotion or support of organizations, platforms, or people that threaten or condone violence to further a cause, a Shopify spokesperson wrote in a statement to TechCrunch. As a result, we have determined stores affiliated with President Trump. News of the move was first reported by the Wall Street Journal. It's a reversal of policy for the company, referring to Shopify, which had previously defended the rights of any customer to use the platform. We'll take a look at that article in a minute. And a refusal to engage in what the chief executive Tobias Lutke termed censorship. Shopify CEO attempts to defend continued hosting of Breitbart's online store. I think that's another article. In a now deleted letter Lutke had authored back in 2017, the Shopify chief executive wrote that commerce is powerful, underestimated form of expression, drawing a parallel between individual purchases made by consumers and votes. Lutke had said that it was not Shopify's place to interrupt that free expression, even if personally and as an organization they disagree with the positions on those platforms. Since that 2017 stand, Shopify has softened its position somewhat. In 2018, the company banned some right-wing groups from the platform, including shops affiliated with the Proud Boys, who were involved in yesterday's riot at the Capitol. And as Black Lives Matter protests erupted across the U.S., the company donated some of its funds to civil rights organizations. The company's stock is trading up $66, or roughly 6%, at $1,152.94 on the New York Stock Exchange. So let's look at some analogies or some other examples. Let's say a rapper like Lil Wayne had a Shopify store. Lil Wayne is a rapper, so obviously he kind of glorifies gang culture. A lot of his music is about violence and shooting people. I think the incident happened a couple years ago, but he was recently charged with a felony gun violation from, I think he was caught on an airplane or something like that with a gun a couple years ago. Should Shopify, I don't even know if Lil Wayne has a Shopify store, but should Lil Wayne should Shopify take down Lil Wayne's Shopify store because he glorifies violence and gang life in his music? I'm not sure if the official Black Lives Matter movement has a Shopify store, but we saw during the summer, looting, violence, rapes, murders, cities burning down. Did Shopify, or if they do have a store, should Shopify take down a Black Lives Matter Shopify store? If there is, let's say, an athlete or a musician who has a Shopify store selling their merchandise or their music, and they wind up getting accused or getting convicted of domestic violence against their boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, should Shopify take their store down? I'm sure you guys kind of get what I'm getting at, but this is kind of a slippery slope. So right now it's about glorifying violence, but what if Shopify doesn't agree with your political views? What if you sell some type of device and Shopify doesn't like the item that you sell? What if my point here is that this becomes a very slippery slope And when you're reliant on a third party can take your website down essentially at any time for any reason because it's their platform. Now, I kind of get where they're coming from, right? Like Shopify doesn't want to be associated with Donald Trump. He's kind of a negative topic, a negative person right now. Shopify doesn't want to be associated with him. And they're a private company. It's 100%, it's their prerogative to say, we don't want you on our platform. We don't want to be associated with you, and take that down. But I also think the wider e-commerce world needs to look at this and say, well, today Donald Trump's the bad guy, but what if my niche, my topic, my store, the apparel, the merchandise I sell, if you're doing anything controversial whatsoever, whether it be politics, religion, cuss words, sex, anything like that, if you're doing anything outside of like selling socks, and this is kind of the direction that Shopify is going to go, your store is not really safe. Now, I don't necessarily think we're going to see a big movement back to people having hosted WordPress stores. For somebody who's not tech savvy, that's either outside of their realm, or it's going to be a huge learning curve or a huge expense hiring somebody to do that for them. But long before this incident today took place of Shopify pulling down Trump's store, I've made several videos in the past. I think I even made a dedicated video on this very topic. And, if you are considering moving to a new platform, if you're setting up a new e-commerce shop and wondering, should I build my own site? Should I do e-commerce? Should I do Shopify? Should I do BigCommerce? Depending on what you sell, this might want to weigh into your considerations. I'm curious to hear how you guys feel about this. And again, please try to take the fact that it's involving Trump out of the equation. Look at other situations. Put somebody else in Trump's place. Would you still agree with this happening? Let's take a look at this other article, which had previously defended the rights of any consumer to use their platform. This one is from about 4 years back, February 9th. Shopify CEO attempts to defend continued hosting of Breitbart's online store. I think Breitbart is a news organization, if I'm not mistaken. Shopify CEO Tobias Lutke penned an open letter in response to the ongoing barrage of communication received by himself and other Shopify employees about their continued decision to host the online store of Breitbart, the right-wing publication which regularly publishes racist and sexist headlines and content. And I believe Breitbart is part of Google's news organization. And if, Google News, TechCrunch is somewhat of a liberal source. And the reason I say that is Google, if something truly was right-wing or hateful, Google News would not allow them to be part of their organization. I know Zero Hedge, Google kicked off of being part of the Google News network a while back. And as far as I know, Breitbart is still part of the Google News. Somebody correct me if that's not the case. Lutke's argument generally rests on a free speech defense, claiming that any attempt to apply a moral lens to what stores operate on Shopify would threaten to censor a right to free expression. Lutke contends that commerce is a powerful, underestimated form of expression and draws a parallel between individual purchases made by consumers and votes, and suggests that it's not Shopify's place to interrupt that free expression, even if personally and as an organization they disagree with the position of those on the platform. Shopify has instructed Google Ads not to display ads on Breitbart.com, as Lutke notes, which means it does not want its brand associated with theirs in that regard. As some of the critics of Lutke's letter on Twitter have suggested, this is both a gross overestimation of the role of a commerce platform and a significant underestimation of the responsibility of a private business to its clients and customers. First, Shopify cannot actually censor anything since it's not a state agency or an organization, and it is not legally bound to provide a platform to anyone, even if they technically operate within the law. And again, to me, a couple kind of things about how they're framing this argument. Just because, I guess if we're talking about First Amendment censorship, well, yeah, only government can censor people according to the First Amendment, because the First Amendment refers to government, not private organizations. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and this is kind of a wider discussion and something that Joe Rogan weighs on a lot. Joe Rogan says, his argument, which I kind of agree with, is Twitter, Facebook, all these platforms have become so large, they've become such a large part of mainstream society and culture, that if you censor somebody off of social media, you're essentially making them irrelevant in the real world. And despite these being private companies, they play such an important role and have such a reach in shaping society and culture and communication that it should really be treated like a utility and everybody should have access to these things. And I think that's kind of initially where the Shopify CEO kind of weighed on this. Like, look, it's really not my place to make moral judgments about who can be on my platform. And they've kind of changed direction on that. In fact, Shopify's own terms of service contain a standard declaration that the company reserves the right to refuse service for any reason at any time, and that it can also modify or terminate the service for any reason without notice at any time. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with when you get in bed with a third party. If they don't like the color of your shirt, they can shut down your Shopify store, and that's what's kind of scary about dealing with third parties. And it takes away a lot of the benefit of having your own website, right? You might as well just sell on Etsy and Amazon if that's the case. These are the same types of standard legal clauses that allow advertisers to terminate arrangements with publications they deem out of sync with their brand values. Lucky also uses a slippery slope, which was my argument, to contend that any decision to remove a merchant based on a moral code is a stepping stone to a situation in which the company can no longer claim to operate on a principle of democratic access to commerce for all, resulting in a biased and diminished platform. Again, this is an overreach because the slippery slope argument can never hold up to real world use, and private entities and platforms with public reach are always drawing and redrawing the line of what's acceptable based on factors including corporate values, public response, and user reaction. Perhaps the most concerning, Lucky uses the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, as an example of why Shopify takes this position. He quotes the organization on their own defense of the speech of rights of communists, Nazis, Ku Klux Klan members, and accused terrorists, pornographers, anti-LGBT activists, and flag burners as justification for his company's stance. This is wrong. The ACLU defends the state-granted rights of members of those groups to express themselves, which has nothing to do with the ability of the same organization to profit by their hate speech via commercial offerings. Everyone may have the right to say whatever they want, but luckily private companies and private individuals have the right to minimize the impact of hateful speech. So here's kind of interesting, right? Like, the government should allow people to engage in hateful speech, but it's private businesses' responsibility to shut down hateful speech or really any speech that they disagree with. I don't know, that just seems kind of weird to me. Lucky's mistake is placing Shopify on the wrong side of that equation. He believes his company occupies the same space as alienable rights to free speech, privacy, pursuit of happiness, and safety, but in fact, the platform is a boon, freely offering above and beyond those rights, and one just as easily rescinded. So this article has a strong slant, but I think it kind of highlights how Shopify has kind of changed their stance on this. I'd love to hear how you guys weigh in on this. And again, take the individual out of the matter. Take Donald Trump out of the matter and fill in your favorite celebrity, your favorite musician, whatever else. Should Shopify start making moral judgments on what type of stores should be able to operate? If you think they should, actually I was going to do the thumbs up, thumbs down thing, but we'll just say if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Drop a comment and let us know where you guys weigh in on this. If you enjoyed the video, again, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button below, and we'll catch you on the next video. Later, guys.